from South Africa, including the president and the G20, you know that we have had a series of discussions, engagements, community dialogues, community meetings to try to understand the African voices and find a way of fostering the African voices into the G20 processes. And we are quite happy that this event meets us at a point where we think that we have done everything we could. Of course, there's always room for improvement, but we've done everything we could to try and ensure that we capture African voices. And I think our product at the end of these processes, as South Africa hands over to the United States, will show that we have gathered views on different topics, different issues, different things, and hopefully they will help advance the African priorities. Today we have a very strong panel. Of course, the keynote address will be none other the Deputy Minister of International Relations, Comrade Alvin Bottas, and I know that we'll introduce when we get to it. But not to take time, I want to welcome Ambassador Lindiwe Zulu. She's a friend of SALO, and she doesn't need any introduction. She has been a champion of solidarity for many of us. We have been working on solidarity in this region and beyond. And Ambassador will give us welcome remarks, and then we get into the meat of it with our speakers.
Thank you very much. Very good afternoon. It's already almost evening for everybody. Whatever notes I might have prepared are not going to work now because we are running out of time. I just want to say that first and foremost, I thank SALO for having had the opportunity to insert itself in here, because I know what SALO goes through in ensuring that they have the resources, they have the plan, they have everything. I've worked with SALO for many, many years. More than 15 years I've been working with SALO. So it's an absolute pride for me and the rest of the people that have been working with SALO, for SALO to be part and parcel. And I'm hoping that post this, SALO will also focus on some of the decisions, resolutions that are going to be taken here. Quite frankly, from where I am, all I need to see is to see more and more young people participating, more and more young people being empowered to be able to drive our SALO will know. I started this thing of calling for young people to participate in SALO activities. Molly would know those days of the Zimbabwe facilitation process. And I used to say to SALO, invite the young people from universities to come and be part of. That's more than 10 years ago that I said that. And so my plea to SALO is, those of us who've worked with you that have had the experience of going to different places to bring peace, security, and stability in the continent, we are willing to share our experience and all. And this G20, somebody said somebody thought the G20 will be boycotted. No, we haven't boycotted it here. We are here. And for me, the most important thing is just to see the SALO flag, the SALO, can you imagine it, building consensus on peace, human security, and development. Without much ado, I think it's better I leave the time to the rest of the people, and especially my comrades here, who is the keynote speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you so much for all you do for this continent and this region. And we hope to continue working with you this journey for a very long time. I want to go straight, Deputy Minister, to our first speaker today, Comrade Brian Labor, who is with the Open Society Foundations, and a Pan-Africanist who has been at the center of supporting some of these initiatives that we have had across the continent. So I'll ask Comrade Brian to give his evidence.
You said 2 minutes.
Yeah, 27.
Okay. a mistake. When you give him the podium, it's a mistake. Comrade Minister, Ambassador Lindiwe, eminent comrades in the room. Chinua Achebe says, the impatient idealist says, give me a place to stand and I shall move the earth. But such a place does not exist. We have to stand on the earth itself and go with her as a base. And Enneke the bird says that since men have learned to shoot fast, to shoot more accurately without missing, he has learned to fly without perching. And then describing what colonial folks had done, he said, he has put a knife on the things that held us together, and we have fallen apart. The world within which South Africa assumed leadership of the G20 was characterized by 7 contradictions. The first contradiction is the rise of the power of oligarchs. Oligarchs whose power transcended states and normal institutions, and oligarchs who had an interest in controlling from agricultural to industrial to education policies. And this is important because it bypasses the normal democratic process. Number 2, it was in a context where multilateralism is facing its greatest strain since the 1940s. Those who were architects of this system that was meant to preserve the colonial and racist division of labor between countries that were supposed to supply raw materials as net exporters of raw materials and net recipients of finished goods. Those people who were responsible for this, seeing the rise of middle powers and the rise of alternatives for the global south, they began to unbundle the system they put together because it was no longer benefiting them only. So multilateralism was in a moment of crisis, but even in that moment, there's a third contradiction, which is the yearning by those who come from the global majority world to keep the system of global cooperation together, even with its imperfect normative frameworks. There are those who believe that the system must be transformed, but normative frameworks that make sure that we remain accountable for how we behave towards other states and peoples needed to be sustained. But this system is severely strained. And the third was the rise of right-wing populism, or a politics of populism that questions everything that we thought was settled. It questions the question of equality and equity, the question of sustainability. It engages in climate denialism. So when South Africa says part of its motto in G20 sustainability, it is doing so in a context where there are others who are committed avidly to ensure that sustainability does not define the new global norm and the future. But there's a fourth contradiction, the feminization of poverty. The feminization of poverty, which means that despite many years of progress, we were seeing 3 things: structural violence against women, which seemed to be a conspiracy against women by the state, the market, and sometimes by elements in civil society. With domestic violence, societal violence, sexual and gender-based violence, economic violence, climate violence, and ecological violence against women has increased disproportionately. Let me explain this. The majority of people left in many African and many global South countries' rural areas are female. And it is in those areas that rapacious extraction is happening. It is in those areas that people want to remove the rules that govern how we extract. And in this context, there was a fourth contradiction, which is increasing debt. African countries, because they are inappropriately assessed for risk, they borrow they borrow similar amounts to their European and other counterparts and pay a premium much higher, 8 to 12%, when the Europeans would for the same amount pay 1%, and Asian and other colleagues 5%. Such that the idea that there's an African debt crisis is a constructed reality, that the cost of capital is made unaffordable for Africa keep her dependent on those who extract her raw materials, so that even the hope that critical minerals would become Africa's conduit of transformation will remain falling as long as we don't address the question of cost of capital or some form of fiscal, economic, and financial sustainability. And the fifth contradiction is that the African state itself was facing its greatest danger to itself. The death of ideological clarity, the rise of elite capture, and the rise of criminality at the center of the African states, which means even for those states that had emerged out of liberation with the clear ethos of liberatory politics, they had found themselves stuck in the tailwinds and the headwinds of criminality at the core, elites gone rogue, and the masses locked out of the premises of governance and the economy. And so the people have become bandits against the state, and the state has become a terrorist against the people, because the contradictions of distribution and redistribution within the economy have not been adequately attended. In this context, comrades, there is another crisis, which is the crisis of what the liberals had sold as democratic liberal democracy, anchored on the idea that representative politics would solve our crisis. It will enable us to select the best leaders. Clearly, if you link the first point on oligarchy and the last point, and this point I'm making on democracy, you will see it crumble at its very heart in those countries that had championed themselves, elevated themselves as the real models of democracy. There was a hole in the heart of democracy. And that hole is that they had emerged a politics of representation that was incapable of delivering to the poor, to women, and to the next generation, to young people. And finally, Africa faced a generational crisis. This generational crisis is that, by and large, whether it's the countries that emerged out of liberation or those that remained tethered to the colonial powers in that their currencies were controlled by such colonial powers, these African states, because they had embraced in the moment of structural adjustment, this ideology that wealth would trickle down, that you need to disembowel the state, make it lean, make it mean. We found ourselves in a situation where the African state is incapable of providing basic public service, is incapable of actually being a facilitator of localized wealth creation. It then became what those to the left used to call a manager of bourgeois interests, a manager of international finance capital interests. So within the state arose contradictions. And in these contradictions that I've described, friends, a boldness has emerged amongst non-progressive forces. Why? Because the progressive forces are in retreat. The progressive forces are fragmented. The progressive forces now suffer from an ethical crisis. If you doubt us, the feminists will be trying to get progressive forces to put progressive agenda on African Union, on SADC agenda. No, I'm not talking about UN agenda. Progressive forces now think it's criminal to speak on behalf of their own people, because somehow they must counter, put their tails between their legs, please international finance capital and every other external interest, auction their people if necessary for their own primitive accumulation. Even as this misery of ethics and kwashiorkor of leadership manifests, what we are seeing increase is fundamentally the following. The laws that we put to govern us, the institutions that we put to govern us, the idea that we thought would take us into the future are in crisis. And South Africa has done well. It has done well to place these matters of critical minerals on the agenda, matters of inequality on the agenda. South Africa has done well to put matters of cost of capital on the agenda, matters of sustainable financing on the agenda. South Africa has done well to galvanize the voice of the global majority, including some Europeans, on this one question. If we don't pull together, the consequences of a world fragmented around this narrow, sectarian, and sometimes historical interest would be that we will all be destroyed. And we'll be destroyed not because we are weak, we'll be destroyed because we lack the resoluteness to see that despite and in spite of our differences, it's now an existential question whether we save a form of global cooperation. Friends, I thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian, for setting the context, but also highlighting, just briefly, what some of the successes of this year have been. Out of this meeting, the hope is that we'll be able to identify the legacy of South Africa's G20 presidents, but more importantly, we'll be able to put on the table what can be an agenda in a small way beyond South Africa's 2020 presidents. How does Africa ensure that its priorities remain on the table even as we remake the multilateral order, which of course is facing a crisis at the I want to check if Musisi is not yet. Perfect. I want to move to the next speaker, Mandisa Kanyile. We know that in this G20, there have been people that were in the official engagement groups, engaging with the official processes, but there was also many others who were pushing as much as they can to ensure that other voices that are not engaged in the official processes are also contributing to the official processes. So we know that there is a group of civil society organizations called the We99, and they are having a summit, I think, starting today at the Constitutional Hill. And we have invited to help us identify the legacy of this G20, locking the gains of the G20, and importantly also identify the gaps and how do we bridge those gaps as we begin to put a program of action beyond 2025.
Thank you so much. Hi everyone. My name is Mandisa Kanyile. I know it says Mandisi. I think they're trying to identify me with the artist. No, I'm the adult. Okay, so I come from the movement called We the 99. We are going to be hosting the People's Summit. It's going to be taking place from Thursday until Saturday. We're going to be at Constitutional Hill. And the reason why we're gathering is because essentially the Leaders Summit, let's be honest, it's not like to select the 1%. The 1% being the billionaires, the 1% being the corporates, the 1% being the entities that are oppressing the 99%. And that's why we call ourselves We the 99. So we have certain demands that we'd like to actually bring forward. The first of them is that we'd like to tax the 1%. We'd like to make billionaires and corporates actually pay their fair share. The second is we'd like to see an end to corruption, especially in this continent. It has robbed us so much as a people. We want to drop the debt. Why are we still paying apartheid debt? Please, comrades, tell us why are we still paying apartheid debt? Why don't you just reflect and F once and all? Right? We want corporate accountability, especially for environmental destruction, labor abuse, the human rights violations. We want to remake multilateralism in a way where global institutions actually serve the people and not for 1%. We want climate justice now, especially on this continent where it affects Black women the most, the issues of climate change. We want the value and the redistribution of care work, especially in health and education, putting our communities first. And of course, most important, we'd like to end hunger. So what we've decided to do is that we'd like to use this moment of this G20 to actually gather voices that are working within economic justice all around in communities. We want trade unions, we want women, we want GBV activists, we want all of us to come together and we want to make our voices heard, we want to make our demands heard. So we're going to be having a festival over 3 days. The first day is going to be called Memory Movements in Action, where we're going to be remembering the movements that have served in our continent. We're going to be talking about the living libraries that we have on our continent, and we're also going to be debating amongst ourselves. The second day will be the Solutions Festival, because we can't always come to cry. We must also come with our own solutions. And those solutions do not need to be imposed on us, but we need to bring them forth ourselves. So the second day, we're going to be talking about alternatives. We're going to be talking about what street actions can we take going forward, because it doesn't end next week Saturday when the G20 leaders are done. We still need to continue, and we still need to make sure that the voice of the global south is heard. And of course, because it's South Africa and December, there is going to be a concert. So we will be enjoying ourselves in a Solutions Festival concert on day 3. Please enjoy it. So you still can sign up. It's www.be99.com, and you can still join us for the 3 days. It starts on Thursday and ends on Saturday. We hope to see many of you on site with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Magis. It's important to have 4 voices on the team. And I think that's
It's the aim, not an I.
what did I say, Magis?
The us.
So they missed your name on the prop. That's apologies for that. Pussy, is Pussy? Not yet. So I want to move very quickly to Comrade Briggs Bomber, who is with Trust Africa, the director of programs at Trust Africa, but also a very strong voice across the continent in supporting the work that civil society movements have been doing. I know that he has been at the center of many engagements that are pushing a lot of the things that are on the table, that were put by South Africa on the table across the continent. Briggs.
Amanda. Amanda. Viva Africa, viva. Viva Africa, viva. Thank you very much. The invitation to me was to reflect a little bit on what I had from the speakers that spoke before me, and engage this question of what happens now. I think it's been framed as from Johannesburg to Washington, D.C. What is that process? What is that road? What is that handover of the baton, given everything that we are aware of? I think someone in the earlier session celebrated the massive presence of people that we have in this space today, and asked a rhetorical question to say, by the way, who said the G20 was boycotted? So I think that's already a place to start. The South African president, as has already been hinted and said explicitly by those who spoke before me, I think we can say without any fear of contradiction that it's been historic. Last night, we were at an economic justice soiree, and there were people who were arriving from Brazil, people who were coming into the space for that continuity that we are exploring today. I echo what I heard, Brian, from colleagues who spoke, that placing solidarity, equity, and sustainability on the global agenda and making it a central part of the global conversation today has to be noted as part of the historic presidents of South Africa, of the G20. This is important because I think, as Brian said, we are at this moment of inflection where the big ideas that anchored the global world order as we know it have become exhausted. They can no longer provide answers to the most pressing questions for humanity. Questions of how we take care of ourselves in economic terms, questions of democracy, questions of climate, and there's this massive contestation put forward new ideas that then anchor what comes next. And with the rise of the right that we had, the rise of nationalism and the rise of populism that we are seeing in many parts of the world, it's coming with a proposition that says the way to move forward is to start to look inward. The way to move forward is to start to point at the other as the reason or the cause of our challenges. The way to move forward is to seek the easy way out, or to turn Amilcar Cabral on his head. The way to move forward is to claim easy victory and tell lies. So there's a whole proposition that we are confronted with. And I think placing solidarity, placing sustainability, placing equity at the center of the global conversation right now speaks to historical boldness. We must therefore understand why Marco Rubio posted on his platforms and then even it in a press conference that he is not going to South Africa because South Africa is centering solidarity, is centering equity, is centering sustainability. He repeated those words. When I first saw it, I thought it was a fake news post because I was like, who in their right mind can question these words? But that's actually what he has said. You go up, you can see it, you can confirm that. And he goes on further to say solidarity, equity, and sustainability is a DEI agenda. So he goes further to attack diversity, to attack inclusion, and to attack equity in the same breath. So we are at this moment where there's this massive contestation because what has happened in the collapse of the world order, the post-1945 world order that we've known, is a collapse of the value systems that anchored that order. It's an order that was centered on individualism. And when you say this, it sounds fantastic, but the godfather of the economic thinking that has been dominant, Adam Smith, he actually says it's from the individualism of the butcher that we all get our meal. So there's this big idea that you all pursue, everyone pursues their individualism, and somehow it's going to amount global good. So I think we have an opportunity, the moment of crisis, yes, but it's also a moment of opportunity through the conversations we're having here, put forward a different kind of value proposition. This has been tried and we see effects of it. It's what explains the problems that we are seeing all over the world. And I think as Africa, we particularly know that whatever the question, community is the answer. We know that our societies have been sustained by Ubuntu. I am because you are. We know that solidarity, the relationships are what binds us as a people, as communities, and it's what has enabled us to move forward and to move beyond crisis, the crisis that we face in our community. So we have a lot that we can offer as a continent in terms of emergent new order that is under education right now. So just to move in terms of this northward shift that is happening and some of the risks that I think we need to be aware of. Even I am trying to imagine what this whole G20 discourse is going to be coming from the White House, particularly the new 900-seater or. So we do run the risk that geopolitical competition and considerations will replace the bold agendas that are coming from Johannesburg. We run the risk that there will be a retreat from multilateralism, conversations on global solidarity, to start to think a lot around these small, mini-lateral deals-based spaces that actually exclude African voices and exclude voices from the global south. We also run the risk of a turn or a reimposition of the old Washington consensus logic around, as I said earlier, individual utility, fiscal austerity, liberalization, conditional financing, all of those things. And we run the risk of the deprioritization of the conversations that are hot right now, particularly around the reforming of the global financial architecture and the reforming of the global governance at the level of the UN Security Council. Conversations that are hot around reforming the global tax cooperation framework, the big conversations that are happening now on UN tax convention. There's momentum around these conversations. And this space, under the South African presidency, has really nurtured and I think put wind behind the sails. So these are the risks that I believe confront us. And as I wrap up, I think we need to be strategic then. As we've said, we don't even know how this process is going to be handed over in terms of chairing or chairmanship or chairpersonship of the G20. And the unfortunate thing is that the G20 works pretty much on precedents. There's no, a lot of things are not formalized or codified. As we know, there's no defined mechanisms or even permanent secretariat, which leaves a lot of room to the next president to really completely change what this is. We heard them saying he can even turn it into a G19 from a G20, the way that G8 changed to G7. There's that threat and has been made from the White House to say some of the people on the G20 platform are not even, or are not even supposed to be there. So I think moving forward, we really need to politicize the AU membership of the G20, but the EU in general, as our preeminent African institution for consolidating an African voice. We need to politicize that platform, repoliticize that platform so that as is expressed as an aspiration in Agenda 2063, it actually becomes influential in shaping global conversations and global discourse. We need to weaponize that platform to the extent that we should be moving into the next G20 with a clear common African position on the big agendas that we care about, on debt, on climate finance, on taxation, on trade. We are not talking enough about trade, on the digital space. So that's really a big thing. And then there's the second idea that I think is worth considering, because we've had Brazil 2024 sharing, we've had India 2023, we've had Indonesia 2022, South Africa sharing now. So there's already, I think, some alignment that we can speak to in terms of this south to south succession of chairs. And we're even going to be having more such coming in, and we must begin to think about some framework that brings those voices as an organized force within the G20 space, so that we can keep the continuity of priorities that matter for the global south alive as we are moving forward. Then the very last thing that I'll say is it's important to not keep all our eggs in one space. So whilst we are pushing and really fighting for all we can get from this particular space, we need to remain alive to the other spaces where the agendas that are on the table can have momentum. And so, we're talking of the financial development space, the Pact for the Future, the follow-up process that's happening there, the Brixton Initiative, the space around which the climate conversation is happening. So we need to complement the G20 momentum with the work that we can push and advance in all these different spaces that we are already engaged in. Lastly, I'm saying we do have an opportunity before us to put forward, argue, fight, advance a more just world that centers the agenda that South Africa has introduced to the global conversation: equity, solidarity, sustainability. It was a most prophetic agenda, and we celebrate South African universities for that. Thank you.
We have been given some hope that there is a quite an opportunity for us as we move beyond SALO Africa's G20 presidents. And there are opportunities that exist, and some of them are quite practical. They are echoing a lot of practical steps that we have had throughout the year across different forums. But we have a starting point that putting solidarity, equity, and sustainability on the forefront. South Africa gave us the masterstroke to start from. We know what solidarity has done for this continent and for this region, especially in terms of immigration. So if we go back to those basics, we are likely to move forward quite strongly. I know that young people usually don't ask for permission to be on tables and platforms. I'm supposed to have a young voice here, but I seem to be having challenges with this. So before I go to the minister, the deputy minister, Comrade Pussy, you have, I think 4 minutes because you are. So let's have young people been a part of this process from the beginning of the year. And it is important to ensure that we catch what were the highlights from them.
Thank you very much. Sorry that I'm late. We do get development across the country, so I'm stuck in traffic. Good evening, everyone. My name is MX Busisiwe Namalo. I'm one of the people appointed by the President SALO Ramaphosa on the National Youth Executive Development Board, NYDA. So I'm speaking on behalf of all young people on inside. So good afternoon, Deputy Minister, Honourable Alvin Moses, Ambassador Ndile Zulu, Ambassador Mandisa Mphahlwa, Chairperson of the session, distinguished guest, and Chairperson Dr. Sunshine, who's also in another side event over here of the NYDA, distinguished guest, representative from civil society, youth leaders, diplomatic community, and all protocol observed. Good afternoon. It's a true honor to speak here on behalf of the National Youth Development Agency, which is an agency that gathers to bring the heartbeat of our continent, African civil society, and a sector that has never hesitated to speak truth to power. We always demand inclusion and to ensure that development is not something to be done by our people alone, but with them. Today, here, as we take stock, we're really reflecting on the G20 presidency and what it means for Africa, SADC, and most importantly, Africa's youth. We're at a moment where in a presidency with complicated issues on a continent. South Africa is assuming G20 at a time when Africa stands at a crossroads. Our economies are battling with unemployment, slow growth, and global shocks. Inequality remains stubborn, even as young Africans, like the fast and hard-beating demographic bloc on Earth. We have issues of climate adaptation, demands, urgent justice and justice solution. We have global governance structures issues that underrepresent African voices. The G20 presidency now puts South Africa's opportunity and the continent to give us an unprecedented opportunity and a channel to share the African priorities in the world's most influential economic forum. But that opportunity is only meaningful if it includes civil society, most importantly, the youth and marginalized voices. Civil society is not just a stakeholder on the sidelines. It's a partner, a watchdog, and a source of innovation. African civil society has been critical in advancing human rights, inclusion, and equality, shaping debates on the just transition, renewable energy, and climate resilience, holding states accountable for public finance, debt transparency, and progressive taxation, ensuring that young people and women are not treated as beneficiaries, but also architects of policy. Through the SADC lens, we know that regional development demands regional thinking, cross-border partnerships, harmonized policies, and most importantly, the most collective and moral voice that speaks for the 380 million citizens on this continent. So we as the NYDA, our role is very simple. We want to ensure that all young people are not the last to benefit from development, but they must be the first to shape it. The G20 presidency arrives at a time when African youth are leading in climate justice movements, innovation in digital and creative industries, building small enterprises and feeding households and stimulating economies. Young people are demanding representation in the political decisions from Johannesburg to Washington. Our role is not just to push global leaders to recognize Africa's youth, that we are not just the future, we are the potential, we are the past, we are the present, and we are the future. So now, what we want to prioritize as G20, as the NYDA, would like to see a more inclusive economic transformation, which means that we need to ensure that industrial policies that builds African manufacturing, agriculture, green and blue economies, while demanding barriers for women, youth, facing and accessing markets. We also want to see climate justice and energy just transition. The G20 needs to commit to a just transition where Africa is not punished for a crisis that we do not create. Youth must be reskilled for the green jobs, and communities must be supported in adaptation and resilience. Secondly, we want to see a debt relief and financial reform. Africa cannot be the breath of our economies, but we are suffering under the unfair debt regimes. South Africa's presidency should push for the global reform of financial architecture in the multilateral banks and the credit rating systems that disadvantage the global south. Thirdly, we demand digital access and innovation and ecosystems. Connectivity is not just a right or a luxury, it's a right. Digital inclusion must be prioritized to ensure that young Africans are participating in the 4IR and the AI global economy. We also want social justice, gender equality, and human rights. Inclusive governance always and must remain non-negotiable. African civil societies are central to safeguarding our rights, including those of women, children, migrants, LGBTI persons, and all vulnerable communities. Fifth, we need to ensure that subject to Washington, we have a collective voice of Africa's voice. This dialogue is not just a bridge, it needs to go from Johannesburg to our lived realities, Washington to global market decisions. But both of these lie ensure that the voices are unified in one African voice. We're demanding justice, representation, and partnership that is rooted in equality. South Africa's G20 presidency must reflect the SADC priorities in the continental aspirations, especially as Africa prepares to host the more global summits and expand its leadership and footprints. The NYDA, we are committing to elevating youth voices through national and regional dialogues, partnering up with civil society to monitor the G20 commitments, ensuring that youth development, employment, entrepreneurship, and skills remains central to South Africa's G20 agenda. We want to be creating pathways where young African researchers are innovators, activists, and are able to influence policies at a global level. This presidency is not just government's responsibility alone, it's a national project. It requires all of us to get along. As I conclude, this presidency needs to leave a legacy. Let us now allow a moment not to pass for ceremonial milestones. Let this be a turning point where African civil society and African youth are shaping the global governance with authority and confidence. From Johannesburg to Washington, to SADC, and to the G20 table, our voices need to travel together, not as whisperers, not as requests, but very clear that we are united in Africa, and Africa is ready to lead, to innovate, and Africa is also demanding justice on the world stage. I thank you.
Wonderful, unapologetic. I mean, it's critical that young people are in the center of these discussions because the ideas are impeccable. They have a clear path of where to go and what should be done. Thank you, Musin, for those quite comprehensive remarks. I'm sure that I don't have to sum up because we don't have time. And I know that my team is capturing the important points of this discussion. And comrades, I need to move very quickly to go to the key moment of this discussion. And it is a privilege for me to bring to the podium a man who needs no introduction in this place, in SALO meetings, but also a man who has embodied South Africa's G20 push for their justice, for climate equity, and for a reformed multilateralism. Help me to welcome Deputy Minister of the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, Comrade Alvin Waters. Thank you.
Let me start with an apology, ladies and gentlemen, or maybe a disclaimer. I don't have the same privilege like Brian to speak my mind, because I'm accompanied by members of the South African Foreign Service. So ordinarily they are from public diplomacy, but they're actually here to keep record what they say. So hopefully you will get out of my contributions what I call nuances, which I can debunk should it be required. But let me welcome and thank Ambassador Lindiwe Zulu. We also have Ambassador Cummins here, and then obviously the board member of SALO, Molly Dlamini. And I think SALO is an important non-state actor in South Africa, but obviously because of their interest within the SADC region broadly and the African continent. And I think, ladies and gentlemen, the questions should be, what is the ambition of the delegates here today attending this side events as it relates to the ultimate, the declaration of the Leaders Summit? So I want to just maybe highlight a few matters. I think our thematic approach has been sufficiently covered. Some of the issues that during our G20 presidency we are dealing with, and some other aspects that are there in the world. For example, the first issue is we have 4 overarching objectives of the G20 presidency. One speaks about strengthening of disaster resilience and the response thereof. And then there's a second concomitant priority that speaks about mobilization of financing for just energy transition. The third one, of course, is about debt sustainability for low-income countries, and the fourth speaks about harnessing of critical minerals. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the G20 is an important platform, but it should not stop here. It should, delegates from the African continent must take this debate to the regional economic communities, the RECs, which is our, subcontinental structures that drives regional vision. And outside of the continent, there's a number of multilateral organizations which should be seized with this matter. For example, why disaster resilience and the mobilization for just energy transition, it's a key priority. Because of the pitfalls, ladies and gentlemen, that we have met. Everyone here knows the debate about climate change. You know about the important discussions as it relates to UN FFC contributions, the national determined contributions of countries, and an agreed approach towards just energy transition was the pathways to final just energy transition. So that was the agreement made. Now, in that agreement, you have, for example, all 27 countries of the European Union are part of all these conference of the parties, the COP processes. I mean, we just completed the COP 13 process now. But then simultaneously, the EU Commission then introduced what is called the Carbon Tax Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM. Now, CBAM, ladies and gentlemen, seek to impose an additional tax obligation on countries that, in terms of the optics of the EU Commission, have not decarbonized at the level and a pace that is required. So if South Africa exports its iron ore, if Botswana exports its diamonds, and there's a carbon emission related to it, there's a tax cumulative measure. And what we are saying in South Africa is that it's the antithesis to the just energy transition pathway financing that we agree in the conference of the party process, isn't it so? And that's why it's a fundamental issue, because the issue about climate financing, ladies and gentlemen, it's a mutual obligation from the countries that needs to decarbonize, but there must be even concessional financial systems that must be agreed to by your more industrialized economies. So I want to raise that issue so that you understand the relationship between our priorities of the G20 and actually what is the difficulties. Then the third priority, ladies and gentlemen, speaks about the important issue. It's about the critical mineral strategy. Why this is critical? Because the future of energy is green. The future of energy is green. Now, the African Union's Commission in December 2024, last year, December, published a green critical mineral strategy. And then all the 5 member states of the AU was then mandated to domesticate that critical mineral strategy, which was at the continental level. Now, South Africa went and we domesticated the strategy in April of this year. So as we speak, ladies and gentlemen, the South African government gave a critical mineral strategy that defines our approach to our repository of minerals. It defines also our approach of how we're going to beneficiate at a point of extraction, the value addition, manufacturing, industrialization, etc. Why this is important? It shows that when the AU Commission provides necessary policy clarity and states follow through to that clarity, you are in a more strengthened position. Now, what is the difficulties? The difficulty is that a country such as Botswana, that is the biggest diamond producing country in the world, doesn't have a critical mineral strategy. All right. The DRC, with the multiplicity of critical minerals, including rare earth elements, doesn't have a critical mineral strategy. So SADC, as a bloc of 16 member states of the southern part of Africa, as we speak, ladies and gentlemen, doesn't have a critical mineral strategy. So for us to take forward the SADC industrialization vision of 2035, you can't do it outside of understanding the key aspect of critical minerals is a key interlocutor. And why I'm saying that, ladies and gentlemen, is for a simple reason. And I said to you, Botswana is the biggest diamond producing country.
Hmm.
Now, the G7, sometime last year, launched what it's called the G7 Initiative on Diamonds. All right. Now, the G7 is the 7 highly industrialized nations, isn't it? But out of the G7 countries, you only actually have one country that diamond producing country. It's Canada, isn't it? It's Canada. They launched the G7 initiative that seeks to subordinate the Kimberley process. They say no, the Kimberley process is not sufficient because they require this initiative to deal with the illicit illicit flows of diamonds. And as South Africa, we have been very clear, it can't happen. You can't come up with a separate initiative on the diamonds produced on the African continent. And we spoke, not on behalf of South Africa's narrow national interests. We spoke as true Pan-Africanists, right? We spoke as true Pan-Africanists because remember, the African Union necessarily doesn't have the same diplomatic presence like South Africa elsewhere in the world. So when we stumbled in the EU Commission, in our mission in Brussels, on these policy initiatives from the EU Commission, when we raise concerns, ladies and gentlemen, we don't raise it as South Africa. We raise it fundamentally as Pan-Africans. So one of our issues that we must get right in this continent is your governments must inherently be more Pan-Africanist in terms of the policy perspectives, but also in terms of their content. And we need to establish that rapporteur with the African Union, in particular with the new leadership, because they are the continental voice of opinion. So that is the third aspect. The fourth aspect is where myself and Brian has been in others a week and a half back at the AU head of office, where we engaged on a high-level engagement on debt financing, debt sustainability, cost of capital, etc. This is one of the priorities of the South African government, debt sustainability for low-income countries. Now, once again, ladies and gentlemen, South Africa is not a low-income country. We are a high middle-income developing nation, isn't it so? But our neighbors, Lesotho is a LDC. So less developed country, isn't it so? So our G20 priority says here, take action to ensure debt sustainability for low-income countries. So when my brother from Zimbabwe went to the AU, he spoke on behalf of the less developed countries in the African continent, where we say no. But why? Firstly, you know that COVID-19, there was vaccine nationalism. Our economies were bleeding in the African continent. It's not growing at a rate at which should. We have the majority of less developed countries on the African continent. But your cost of capital, when you look at the African continent, your cost of capital is far higher than the cost of capital for Europeans. Remember, South Africa, like any other, most of the African states are shareholders in the IMF and in the World Bank. Let's get that right. So any discussion that says no, let's do away with the IMF and the World Bank. It's not a realistic discussion, it's idealistic, because your governments, all of your governments are shareholders in the IMF and in the World Bank. So let's get that right. So why should a country like Serbia, the cost of capital to Serbia, it's better than the cost of capital to Kosovo? Why? Why should it be? If the indices are more or less the same, you look at what is the indices that you look at. You look at democracy. Is there democracy? The regular elections? Is there good governance in place? You look at the type of economic structure that is in place, isn't it so? And then your credit rating agencies then does an assessment, and they then issue you with a credit rating. So the problem is of all the major three credit rating agencies, they are not The head office are not in the African continent. Okay, so when they look at us, they look at us from the optics of a industrialized world. So when there's a difficulty in the Sudan, ladies and gentlemen, they say no, there's a difficulty in Africa. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
When there is unconstitutional changes of government in the Sahel, they say, well, these Africans don't want democracy. Not deliberately being oblivious to the fact that the democratic dividend in Africa surpasses everything else that we have seen the past 20 years. I mean, Tanzania came from elections, we came from elections, Madagascar came from elections, notwithstanding the current difficulties there. Lesotho came from elections, Zambia came from elections, Kenya had elections. Democratic, Botswana, free and fair election. Namibia have a female president, they came from elections. They don't know, they say, wow, these Africans, they don't want democracy because of the difficulties in the Sahel as it relates to 3 states in the Sahel. And when there's a difficulty of in Sudan, they say, no, they conflicts in Africa. Do you understand? And on the basis of that, rating agencies gives you a credit rating. And that's why we, as Pan-Africans, have successfully convinced the AU Commission to collaborate with private sector to launch, and they have launched the credit rating, the Pan-African Credit Rating Agency. All right, that is what I call, it's going to be a game changer because there must be obligation to look at Africa by Africans, but also look at a number of other catalytic instruments that we have. We have the African Peer Review Mechanism, your APRM, isn't it so? The APRM says this is the flagship priorities of the AU. Assess a country on the basis of that set of ideals and their conduct as it relates to that, and then issue credit rating agencies as it relates to those issues. So that is the 4, ladies and gentlemen, what I call overarching strategic priorities that we have really, pushed as South Africa. If you look at the 6 flagship priorities of the AU Commission, it's a mirror image of these priorities. The AU Commission speaks about the transformation of the international financial and economic architecture. It's at the belly of the beast, ladies and gentlemen. And my appeal as I conclude, because they say you must do 2 things when you come to meetings of SALO. You must give your best, and I think myself and the panelists here gave their best. So a round of applause for them also. But our inputs will be not valuable if from this discussion, you take these discussions to the summit engagements tomorrow. And you make sure that in the body of the declaration that comes out, which the President of South Africa must address in his input on Thursday, it's a sum total of our aspirations and what all 5 of us have tabled here today. If you are able to do that, ladies and gentlemen, you would have succeeded in doing what SALO requires. To give your best and also expect the best. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause for the Deputy Minister. And I think that it's quite clear that there are a lot of challenges that were faced, that have been faced by Africa in trying to put the priorities of Africa on the global agenda. But we, from the Deputy Minister, we know that we are in safe hands. They are masterfully trying to navigate a lot of these challenges. And clearly there is a lot of areas that we are seeing progress. And maybe as African citizens, we need to talk more about them. The idea that we now in African rating agents is an important aspect as the minister said. And these are things that as citizens, we need to put at the center of our discussions. I think the key thing that the deputy minister put on the table was the idea that we need to be able to build a true Pan-African agenda. And that our challenges are both internal and external, and our governments across the continent need to rise to the occasion to support South Africa in its leadership and also to support each other. The true essence of solidarity, the way it was done as people were fighting for liberation, is the way that it should be done. And so a really true Pan-African agenda should be one of the things that we take forward as we move. Then the last thing, and the minister put a lot of things on the table. I know we took notes. Important thing is that let's go tomorrow and the day after to the thematic groups of the G-Social and contribute particularly on an agenda that places African priorities at the center, so that as the G20 social declaration is read, it is clear on where Africa should go. And the president, as he puts the final declaration, hopefully will capture some of the aspirations that we have been putting on the table, all of us throughout the year. I wanted to open for a couple of questions. I know that the deputy minister has to rush back, like all of us, to the plenary. But I wanted to open for a couple of questions. So I'll take a few questions. But before I do that, I saw that Ambassador William is here, Ambassador William Karum from the ECOSOC, and he was supposed to be a speaker. Ambassador, I want to give you 2 minutes. It's important for us to understand what the African civil society have been putting at the center in advancing the Pan-African agenda and the priorities that South Africa put on the table. So I'll give you like 2 minutes or 1 hour, 30 seconds. 1 minute, 20 seconds. Is that okay? Okay. You are saying you have 3 minutes. So
Thank you very much. I don't think there is anything new I would say, especially when I look at the fact that senior Congress like Ben and Briggs have been in the room, and then eloquently the minister actually spoke to some of the issues. But from the African Union economic, social, and cultural point of view, I think one thing which is clear is the fact that the coming of the African Union into the G20, like we all see, has given the AU and the continent itself that single voice, which is very fundamental, especially when you look at, even within civil society, we talk about fragmentation, but fragmentation reflects more even at county level. We've seen in many instances when it comes to even issues related to developing Africa common position, there is more interest in terms of our bilateral relationship as against what is there for the benefit of all of us. So I think this is very fundamental that the African Union is part of the G20 because of that aspect of a single voice, and it's able to address several issues which I'm pretty sure we have spoken about related to climate change, vaccine infrastructure, and many other things that have been the main issues we're discussing. But from the civil society point of view, what we want to see is to ensure that we have the inclusion of African voices. And I think that has been the major concern, that this conversation is not limited to a diplomatic kind of engagement only. Where are the African citizenry in terms of making significant contribution on issues that pertain to their development, on issues that are STEM as citizenry? And therefore, ECOSOC has always come in to see how we can mobilize society voices to ensure that we provide critical input into this conversation. So, it took me in 1 minute just to indicate what we have done. We've developed, we did first an opinion call so that we get perspective from citizens and synthesize this and submit to the South African government as perspectives from citizens on issues related to the G20, looking at the various thematics. So we have civil society organizations that are coming on board with practical experience on lessons learned, some of the challenges they have encountered, and what they think that we can do and do better, and provide it as our input into the broader conversation, which we do expect that some of these issues will now reflect into the declaration of the Nutrition Summit. And then lastly, we also did an advisory opinion, basically looking at issues related to climate, transition, climate change, financial inclusion, all these issues that we're talking about, bringing civil society together in a much more broader consultation. These are issues that affect you, and therefore we want you to pronounce yourself. So as there is a sense of ownership when we read out the declaration. It is not just a declaration that has been written by anyone who have a better understanding on how declarations are written, but these are things which are felt needs and the reality when you go to the context. So these are some of the few things that we have done. I know we are running against time, but we do hope that the work will continue immediately after the G20, because the advocacy required us to engage so that we don't just come and make commitments and we leave it at that stage. But how do we follow up so that we ensure that some of these commitments that are made, they are not just commitments because we want to have the photos and we want to have beautiful and nice speeches, but we want to see the practical implementation of those commitments. Let me stop here. I'm pretty sure I'll participate as part of the question and answer in the interest of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador, for highlighting the work that ECOSOC has been doing throughout the year. And I think that we have a challenge tonight, so let's sleep less. Let's try to revisit some of these documents that have been highlighted here as we prepare for discussions in the thematic areas tomorrow, so that we go there equipped, but knowing fully what we want to put on the table. I want to acknowledge Ms. Baloy, the CEO of DECO. Thank you for coming. I know that we did not, because of time, acknowledge a lot of people that are here. I see a lot of former ambassadors. I see possibly the cream of civil society leadership across the region. And I see many other comrades that have been at the center of solidarity across the region. Thank you for coming. Can I take a couple of questions then, or inputs? Brief. Let me start with Ambassador Kam, go to Ambassador and Jabelin, and
Maybe not so that
just is there anyone else who has okay? That's three. Who has the other mic? Can we have it? Or you could have. And even as you come in as well, we know that I think Comrade Musi told us that the chairperson of the NYDA board is here. Thank you for coming, Dr. Sunshine, and thank you so much for being here. Ambassador.
Thank you very much. And for protocol control, I asked the question on everybody talks about implementation. And we always hear things need to be implemented. But with the key areas that has been highlighted today, I'd like to ask the panelists on the issues that you face. How do you see implementation taking place? Because we're going nowhere if we just mention implementation and don't have some kind of formula to get the steps from particularly post the G20, because you know this recommendations, so that when we all go back to civil society analysts, how do we then guide the implementation?
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nonkululeko Khumalo, the Secretary General for Reclaim South Africa. I just have a question for MX Busini Malo. I just need to know, just to ask about the NYDA's voucher system, on how it works. And is there any success stories regarding that? Seeing that the NYPA do find a lot of youth who are in business and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you. Bosi, can you come and sit?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ambassador Jacqueline Zombe. Ambassador. I have a question for the Deputy Minister for Jacob. And it's about the capital flight, which related to the Anglo-American strategy. You know, estimated there's so many billions of rands. And as we talk about critical minerals, I'm just wondering what was the thinking behind like actually allowing this capital flight in South Africa? And we also know that in Zambia, in the Cabo Valley, there's a problem with a lawsuit, you know, about what they did there. Thank you.
Thank you for, okay.
Thanks very much. My name is Mhlan Wangema. Just want to know, the Deputy Minister mentioned that Botswana, I just couldn't hear whether Botswana is the largest producer of diamonds or owns the largest reserves of diamonds, because producing and owning is two different things. The second comment I want to make is much what that has been said today it hinges on unity. And this word unity plays quite a role in how we must go forward. We can say, if you look at UAU versus EU, looks like EU is more united in the way they do things and organize themselves than AU. And yet we know that we are the owners of the greatest mineral resources together as Africa. And yet we are the greatest consumers. How can we turn this around?
In the words of President Kwame Nkrumah, Africa must unite.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, how are you doing? I just want to take the opportunity. There's an item that I think the AU has quite largely overlooked, and it's extremely important. And that is public interest research with regards to copyright law and IP law. I convene an umbrella movement in South Africa called Recreate that comprises of civil society organizations, users and creators, whether they are blind, workers, artists. It affects everyone. And we've hosted 2 international conferences so far, focusing on Africa and the Global South, and showing examples of how researchers need public interest copyright in order to make sure people have access to health, access to reading materials, all sorts of things, and obviously going into the digital age. So I would really great if the AU could also take that up more seriously. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I know that we are pressed for time. I'm hoping that even as we move, we'll also network, exchange numbers, and continue with this discussion tonight so that tomorrow in the thematic groups we are even more powerful. I'll take one last person, then move to the Deputy Minister.
Chairperson, I'm Comrade Jackson Chauke from the ANC Veterans League in Gauteng. I want to pose 2 questions, and I would like to appreciate that young person what was said by Raymond Jim. Someone says we might have to move off from G20. Is it to please point out when at the bottom, I think that everything has said we must build the 12-10 agenda. I like what was said by that minister. So I just want clarity is, do we have to move from G20 just because of someone somewhere who doesn't want to sell food in our country to pay to us? Are we accounting to handout or to the community also?
Thank you so much. Let me start with the Deputy Minister.
Yes, I'll try to respond to the easy ones. And the Brian and the team will deal with more the complex issue. Well, some of it can be career limiting. So he knows. I understand he can be a bit, he can say what I can't say,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Because in the world of diplomacy, you can't say what you think.
Yeah.
Otherwise you can easily be declared a person non grata.
Persona
You saw
non
what
grata.
happened was in the US.
Yeah.
But let me respond to your few issues. Look, I think Botswana's diamond repository is the best quality in the world. Let's be clear about that issue. I mean, if you look at the biggest diamonds discovery, the quality of it, even recently, is the best. The Russian Federation, of course, is the per volume producer, is the leading in terms of the volumes produced in terms of the diamond. But in terms of the production, international value system, currently speaking, Botswana is leading in terms of the quality of the diamond. One of the reasons why Atlanta is because of this G7 initiative, where the G7 initiative actually is intended to, the G7 says they have this G7 initiative on diamonds to stimulate the flow of illicit diamond trading. And when you read the nuances, you speak about the fact that the Russians are the biggest producer in terms of sheer gram volumes. And one of the beneficiaries indirectly has been Botswana. All right. On that issue, notwithstanding the fact that Botswana doesn't have the critical mineral strategy. And that's probably one of the issues. I mean, some of the biggest diamond cutting factories in the world, it's not on the African continent, it's in India. Okay, so all the ladies that are wearing diamond rings, it could have been produced likely the production facilities in India. So that's the dilemma. And that's why what we say, let's do value addition at the point of extraction. Why can't we have a bilateral agreement with India, put up a diamond processing factory in Botswana, in South Africa, in the DRC? But that is, and we are not doing that. And what we say, we need the voice of the AU to become a bit more emboldened in relation to those issues. Look, the second issue, Ambassador Jackie, that I want to raise, and I can't account for the elders that has been there. But I think in hindsight, we could have done things differently, especially when we deal with political economy. All right. So the issue about us having ensured that people dealers from the Johannesburg Stock Exchange that go and list in London, it could have probably been dealt with differently. Had we known about what that will imply in terms of our own industrialization. And that's why I think Brian have said what is needed from civil society is to impose an obligation on your government, to conduct themselves differently in between and beyond electoral processes. All right. I mean, in South Africa, for example, and I can make this confession, in South Africa, we had elections, but during the elections, civil society don't sleep. They give us a run for our money. They take us to court. So they engage us first when we ignore the grievance. They take us to court. The courts whoop us over the knuckles normally. It's one way in a democracy such as South Africa that civil society can play a role. But the second issue is when you have an organized structure of civil society, such as this convergence at this social summit, it requires a consistent engagement with civil society, between civil society and government, but not only with government, ladies and gentlemen, with private capital, with financial institutions. Because the Reserve Bank is ultra conservative, that is their mandate. But why don't you have, remember there was a time when we had the Jubilee Action Campaign for debt reduction. Remember that? Jubilee had solidarity engagements with Reserve Banks. So they engage governments, the national treasuries, they engage Reserve Banks. We speak about cost of capital towards this G20 presidency. I've not seen anyone of civil society that heightened their opinion to national treasury in support of government's G20 presidency on cost of capital by engaging, for example, your Reserve Bank. And what I'm calling for is a responsible and activist civil society in terms of the challenges. So, like for example, if I was from the DRC, I was going to ensure that we are well organized in the DRC so that our government does not make trade-offs that will subordinate the lives and the well-being of our people to the ones of everyone else. But that is your role. And I hope, like I said, I'm looking forward to the type of engagements of unity that will come out of the declaration. I think, yeah, the last issue, and maybe this is just on Ambassador Smith says, why we take decisions and then we don't take decisions, right? She asked why we take decisions and we don't take decisions. Now, Ambassador Lindy Zulu will tell you. I've made an example. We are now the chairperson of SADC, the interim chair of SADC taking over from Madagascar. One of the outcomes, and this is not, it has not been agreed, but me, as someone that I'm engaging with you, I understand the importance of SADC to have a critical mineral strategy. So one of the outcomes from our SADC chairship should be a critical mineral strategy. So anyone in this country, in this hall, from any of the SADC countries, you must ensure that it's a matter that you put on the table of your government. So that when South Africa raised this need, there's no pushback, ladies and gentlemen. There's no pushback against it. And remember, there may be pushback because it's not in the interest of the various objectives to have a critical mineral strategy. Because remember, if you don't have a critical mineral strategy, you can easily auction your country to the highest bidder, isn't it so? I'm just raising, this is a political issue that I'm raising. So from here, the implementation is as follows. You have your own civil societies in different countries. Look at your regional economic communities. We belong to SADC. All right. If you belong to, say, if you're from Nigeria, you belong to ECOWAS. You should have an interest in the conduct of your government in terms of this regional bodies. We are going to Rwanda now. Immediately after the G20, there's an AU-EU Rwanda summit. By now, all of you should know about the 4 pillars. The 4 pillars for the Rwanda engagement, because it's in your interest to ensure that the African Union and all member states that will be present there will continue with this idea of inclusive prosperity and advanced Agenda 2063. And I'm raising this not only with the AU-EU summit, but also, ladies and gentlemen, there's this every 3 years there's FOCA, isn't it so? Convened by China. What is the message that leaders of Africa takes to China in terms of our own inclusive prosperity? As I conclude, right, there's one issue that I just don't understand. Everyone agreed we need, for our economy to grow in South Africa and elsewhere, we need to have support the implementation of the ACFTA, isn't it so? The African Continental Free Trade Agreement. So what we do, we said, look, one way to accelerate the ACFTA is that we need to have a payment and settlement system. So the AU Commission developed a Pan-African payment and settlement system so that we can do settlement in local currency. As we are speaking, you have less than 20 countries on the entire African continent, including South Africa, by the way. All right, including South Africa, that have not subscribed to the Pan-African payment and settlement system, which means our capability or ability to accelerate our economic growth using the ACFTA as a leverage is minimal. Now I'm raising this because I'm a government practitioner. In government, you have conservatives and you have the ones that are not so conservative. If I should ask you something, that should be something smart that comes from this summer, isn't it so? In the interest of Pan-Africanism, right?
Thank you, Deputy Minister. You know, there are euphemisms or coded words for certain things. When you hear people saying there is policy uncertainty in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, they mean you have begun doing those things that will reverse historical inequities. And once you start taking such actions, instead of openly saying, look, hey, you are touching our privilege, they say there's policy uncertainty, and the investors are finicky. Now, the problem is there is one thing that's not uncertain. A Nigerian cleric once says, a time is coming when the poor shall have nothing to eat except the rich. We are producing and reproducing intergenerational poverty. The reality of apartheid, Calabar, racial discrimination, and our own foolishness post-liberation has produced within the majority Black populace a tendency to be echo chambers of racist caricature of Blackness, of Black leadership, of Black society. I need you to understand this because I have chaired what you call this anti-corruption bodies. Now, you will notice in your eloquence about anti-corruption, only in the last 12 years have we now begun to produce multinational corporations as part of the corrupt. Otherwise, all your definitions of corruption had to have a black face so that you confirm what Hegel said before Marx, the European thing. He said the native is in everything but vice and corruption an infant. So this constant infantilization of your own people, of yourselves, of your own systems, of your own governments, has become, is there corruption? Yes, there's corruption. But diversionary tactics that enable Black and Black violence funded by the FBI in the United States, funded here by the apartheid regime, the diversionary tactics create the impression amongst most Black people that you can only have one conversation. You can only talk about corruption of the government, but you can't talk about the inequities of a historical and continuing nature of structured corporate looting of countries and capture of decision making and control of outcomes, such that there can never be a moment where Black people achieve equity and equality. You must always receive charity from your white folks so that you regret ever getting liberated. Then your own leaders do exactly what is expected. They go and buy the most expensive car, live it up in the midst of the misery of the people. And all you then do is see the native, incapable of governance. So I want to suggest to you that we can have two conversations at the same time. Or as the Americans say, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Let's have a conversation about structural issues that are of a historical systemic design. Now, I need you to understand a system of racial capitalism will produce racialized outcome, even if the person presiding over it is as black as the night. Because the issue is not the skin pigmentation, it is the system produces what it was designed to produce. Endemic black immiseration and poverty. Now, I'll tell you what the system needs. It needs civil society that is illiterate in terms of financial and economic matters, but very alive to concepts of ethics. Now, consciousness of ethics without consciousness of economic equality, equity, inclusion, ownership, and control is false consciousness. Because you can believe that if you stop stealing, you don't steal anything at all, then we will have solved the problem of historical injustice. The fact that when we designed Soweto, when we designed townships in Harare, we designed them such that that's where all the wastage from industry flows to. All the pollution of the air goes to. You need to understand this because you must think, why is this person talking about cost of capital? Does he not care about human rights? Yeah, about human rights, but not only today, but in continuity. That's why we must solve the structural issues. So, to answer your question, which is on the fundamental problem is not color line, gender line, those are important issues. The fundamental problem is just the absence of national wisdom and cleverness. Because what has happened is we've constructed liberation or conceptions of liberation amongst Black people without a notion of, do you deserve much more than the tribal trust land? And we kill each other for tribal trust land. Umxhosa kumbe ayisulu uyaleboha or unothawula. Rest. Tribal trustlandization of nativity essentially means that the native will never be international in imagination. Always hyper-localized. You are looking for a wizard or a witch in the local, right? You go, you send your armies to fight in Mozambique to stop the war. But the businesses from South Africa investing in Mozambique are not businesses owned by people who look like you. These the people who are watching this saying the natives are killing each other in Mozambique. You stop the war in DRC, the people who invest are not you. I'm sorry, I'm speaking a little angry, but I'm not angry. I am just in outrage because I need us to be conscious of this fact. So if what is the bigger challenge society is building wealth from non-traditional sources? I think, Minister, it has occurred to many of us that we can run and report you in Brussels, and report you in Paris, and report you in Washington, and report you at Whitehall in London as it is corrupt. I can save us from our corrupt governments, and our saviors will come and take critical minerals in exchange for democracy and anti-corruption. And look, transactional international relations. When live on TV, a president is told, okay, I need to shut up soon. So basically, Jose, I know that we have to go. What I wanted to say is the non-traditional sources The township economy is worth over R1 trillion. UNDP produced a report just a few days ago. The cooperative economy in Kenya alone is worth 1.8 trillion shillings, which is the same size of capitalization as the biggest bank in Kenya. Remittances in Africa are much more than what we get as foreign direct investment and ODA. If Africa is going to deal with the cost of capital on the one hand, that's practical implementation. Africa must create sovereign wealth frameworks and capacities. We no longer have an option, friends. There is no aid coming to aid us. We no longer have an option, friends. The investors think we have leprosy, political leprosy, economic leprosy, right? Cultural leprosy. So they don't come in here at a rush. So, as Steve Biko says, Black continent, you are on your own. If you are on your own, it essentially means civil society, governments, and everybody else. We need to be looking at where will the non-traditional sources of capital come from. Sovereign wealth funds can be implemented. Implemented by who? The government of South Africa, the government of Zimbabwe, Cote d'Ivoire, Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, Kenya. We are seeing a realization, friends, that wealth that is in the ground, wealth that is in our heads, will not come to full realization to solve our intergenerational aspiration simply because we have articulated our mission. It'll come because we've come together and realized to create wealth, we must create it. I just wanted to thank you, and that's why this public interest copyright is important. The last terrain, Njoti, data sovereignty. The next oil, the next gold, the next is data. Our governments are handing over data like they hand over sweets to children at a birthday party. You want to do electoral voter register. They tell us, oh, you're very corrupt, should do biometric voter registration. Who owns the information outside? You want to do population, whatever. Someone comes and they do the population register. You want to do nani nani and nani nani. Every single, the only people who have to get accurate information about your entire population, including their habits, including what their preferences, is someone else. We have shells of leadership in civil society, in academia, in government, holding on to rhetoric. Our data, our critical minerals are being taken. This is why the South African agenda for G20 is important. It's not that we agree 100% with each other, but if we don't accept these things now and accept them at G20, accept them at anywhere else, at what did you call it, at the Forum for Finance for Development, my friends, it's about time we realize that as on daily, yes, on day, we'll deal with each other at home. But when you come, you are not gonna call my wife names, even if I think she's foolish. It's my own thought. You are not going to call my child foolish.
Yeah.
My own foolish person is mine, not your own.
Yes.
We are not allowing this division that comes trying to do a beauty contest or who can criticize Africa and Africanness and blackness the most. Thank you.
Brian spoke so powerfully that you got Munjozi to even stand up. If they promise that all of us remained, seated, going after this Michael. Very little to add after what we heard from Brian and also the Deputy Minister. I honestly am pondering, Deputy Minister, on your statement when you say you are a diplomat, so you can't speak your mind.
Exactly.
Because I'm now wondering what are those things that you are not sharing with us? Because yeah, you have your finger on the pulse. Yeah, it's not much to add, and I think the best way for me is to share a joke that I recently came across. So visualize a young girl, grade 5, back at home, doing homework, and they're seated actually like this, the way we normally do it, with your hand on the side of your head, like really, cracking your brain on something. And the mom comes and says, are you having problems with any class, any particular class? And the young girl responds and says, yes, the bourgeoisie.
Wow.
So when I hear you talk about restaurant everything and everything else that I'm hearing, I think we need to unpack that a little bit more. Just to answer your question, Ambassador, on implementation, I think that it's a very relevant question for us to walk out of this door with, or to take into the next 2 days, and even the days that are coming. The first thing for me is that we need sustained attention to the issues that are on the table. We need to move away from this approach of themes that are declared and priorities that are declared every year. And by the end of the next year, we are already declaring the new theme. Like we change themes as if it's fashion, clothes. We need sustained attention, stay with the issues, keep to them until we solve them. There are big issues that are on the table right now. The issue of an African rating agent, issue of the UN tax convention, the issue of the cost of capital. We need sustained attention from one forum to the next forum. And I think it also speaks to the role that we can play as a society. There should be tracking, there should be monitoring, there should be scorecards, there should be reporting on these issues, so that when we meet again at the next G20 forum or another important platform, we should actually be able to see that this is how far we have come, and compared to where we were maybe 2-3 years ago. So it's very important for us to keep this sustained attention, to track, to monitor, to report, so that there is evidence to inform our advocacy, but also inform policy priorities. Then the other thing I wanted to speak to, I'm happy you brought in the issue of the Jubilee campaign. That's actually the space through which some of us got a lot of our political education, growing up. But one of the things that it taught us was the power of people-to-people solidarity. Even when you have consensus collapsing at the level of the ruling elites, at the level of these official spaces, there's a way in which it's not even just South to South. We knew at that point that we needed to have allies in Washington, D.C., and it became churches, it became student groups, it became these community groups, it became the diaspora who could have access to certain spaces that we would not have ourselves. So even though there is this uncertainty in terms of the handover from South Africa to the US, there is no uncertainty when it comes to connections between progressive communities from South Africa and in the US, from the global South and in the global North. So people-to-people solidarity. Last, the AU must become a political force. I think I spoke about this earlier. And I've also managed to get into the stand up.
The chairperson of the MOJ is so they'll take my question. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Board Member. Thank you very much for the question. In as much the question doesn't belong in the setting, but it's okay. We're going to answer it. Those that were part of the plenary, there's a young boy that was performing that was in a wheelchair. That is one of our beneficiaries as the MYTA. But I must also say that over the years, young people have had challenges with accessing some of our services, even our grant processes. We, as coming into office, we've taken a decision that we're going to process our grants within 20 days. So how we are able to get funding or grant from the MYTA, we visit our offices, we're also available on ERP, where you can make an application. But wherever you're staying, if you've got to the MYTA before you didn't get assistance, I'm here, and the board member Bess is here as well. We can take that in detail and be able to assist you with that. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you, that's sunshine.
every question belongs to this platform. I think your experiences can always benefit experiences of other young people in Zimbabwe, in Botswana, across the continent. So it's important to always talk about those things. Colleagues, I know that we have had a lot of things that were put on the table in terms of the way forward, in terms of the issues that are on the table in the negotiations, the challenges, the gaps that exist. And we learned that the problems, the challenges we have are both internal, they're also external. We have our own issues in-house that we have to resolve. We also have others that come from outside. And with that, I want us to crystallize our momentum by bringing in Molly, who is a board member of SALO and one of the strongest comrades for solidarity across the continent, to give closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Munjozi, and I'll be very quick. Actually, my closing remarks is a vote of thanks and just a little bit. I'd like to thank the Deputy Minister Alvin Borders. Kuti siyabonga kakhulu. Danki, baya, danki. Yeah, DM Hills from Kimberley. So I must say baya, danki. Thank you. Yes, thank you very much for making yourself available. If there's one thing that we really appreciate from our leaders in South Africa is them being willing to engage, and we hope to continue engaging. We want to thank everyone who has come, but I'll just note those that I must observe the protocol. Thank you, Ambassador Lindiwe Zulu, a former minister, a former MK soldier, a current member of the ANC, an activist, and a solidarity activist as well. I don't see her. Oh, there she is. Yes. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Lindiwe Zulu, for being there and being that friend of SALO. She has been a friend of SALO for a long time, from the times when she was an advisor to the president on international relations, dealing with all sorts of issues. So we really appreciate this connection. Thank you to the friends of SALO, Bonita, right at the back, Ambassador Carmen Schmidt, another friend of SALO, Williams, another friend of SALO, and many other friends of SALO that must recognize Ambassador Jackie, former ambassador of Zimbabwe, and many other diplomats that are in the house. And then I'd like to thank everyone who made it here, everybody from different countries that really made it to this session, the political parties that are present, ANC and others. I don't say others, so I'll recognize the ones that I saw. Thank Dr. Oh yes, Dr. Sunshine, NYDA, for being present and for being a friend, our newly found friend. We appreciate you. Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank the panelists, Brian Haroho, OSF, Professor, MX Busingamalo, NYTA. Brian, thank you. We always appreciate your Pan-Africanist posture. Please continue. Ms. Mandisa Kalile, we the 99. I hope we will also join her in the People's Summit so that we can carry the conversation. Ambassador William Ikosok, thank you. We hope to continue partnering with you, and we appreciate that you have been very consistent in our workshops. Mr. Briggs Bomba, thank you for that joke. We will remember that joke. It's very critical from Trust Africa. Thank you to the chairperson, Munjozi Mutandiri. Thank you to the SALO staff that is working in the background. Others are outside. Thank you. And last but not least, our partner for this event, OSF. Thank you very much for helping us, for making this possible. Thank you to the organizers of the G20 Social Summit, also Brian Ram Honeycomb and others, we want to thank. And as I sit down, our takeaway is that we need to violently change the financial economic architecture that does not favor the continent. We also need to violently change the mineral industrial agriculture complex. And I'm glad that we have a farmer in the house, a woman farmer in the house, and Madame Tinswalio there with a nice wrap around her head. She's a farmer, she farms not far from here. And so we need, many speakers in the plenary talked about the arable land that Africa has, more than 50% of arable land. So those are our takeaways. And the last takeaway, of course, the debt issue. And I'm glad that Deputy Minister spoke about the Jubilee 2000. We remember how it started in around 1998, World Council of Churches. We need to link with the ecumenical movement that has been very critical in the Jubilee movement. And we hope that it will be revived. And we're glad that it will be revived. And thank you, DM, for making us think and reminding us that we're actually relaxing when we should be awake to all these issues that are happening. So thank you for reminding us. It's for the first time I hear a government leader challenging civil society that you are sleeping on the job. So we heard you, DM, we heard you. And someone spoke about unity. So we hope that as we close, of course, I'm not a reverend, but I leave you with that way of unity that somebody shared, that let's unite as Africa. We have nothing to lose but our chains. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Smolly. And just to say that, comrades, we are not putting our tools down with South Africa handing over to the United States. We are rearming ourselves. We are getting to work and ensure that the priorities for Africa are on the table. So this is a moment to rearm, not just to talk about the past. So thank you so much for coming. And those who have not signed the register, please, we'll ask you to sign the register as you go out. The speakers, please, can we get a photo, a group photo? Thank you so much. All the speakers, quick photo. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Can I have yeah, your diet, your beautiful diet. African what? African what? What? It's European parliament. Yeah. Good. Welcome, my brother. Hey. My battery is gone. That picture is still broken. No. Shit. Then ambassador now. I'm not sure whether it's, I don't know. Yeah.